Hello and welcome to part 2 of my top 20 adventure films of all time. Before continuing on, I suggest watching part 1 to get the gist of what this list is all about. You can find the link in the description. I won't waste any time rehashing what's already been said, so let's get back on track.
What's that book about?
Oh, this is something special.
At number 9, we're stopping by the 80s again with a true fantasy gem, The Never-Ending Story, directed by Wolfgang Petersen and adapted from the best-selling German fantasy novel by Michael Ende. This is a wonderful and emotionally powerful film about the importance of human imagination and joy. The plot centers around a troubled young boy named Bastian who loves books and escaping into fantasy worlds as a way to cope with the death of his mother and his constant bullying at school. One day he gets chased into a bookstore by a group of bullies where he takes a mysterious book called The Never-Ending Story. He sneaks into the attic of his school to read it, where the narrative then shifts to the story of the book, where a wonderful fantasy world called Fantasia is under threat from an evil and all-consuming entity known as the Nothing, which is also slowly killing Fantasia's ruler, the childlike Empress, who enlists the help of a young warrior named Atreyu to embark on a perilous quest and find a way to stop the Nothing and save Fantasia. All the while, Bastian slowly discovers that there's far more to this book than meets the eye. One of the main things everyone remembers about this film are the various animatronic characters throughout. The movie had an enormous effects team comprised of artists from across both Europe and the US. Whether it's the lovable and tragic Rockbiter, the nihilistic turtle sage, Morla, or the jolly and charming luck dragon, Falkor, everyone has a favorite creature, mainly because the puppeteering work is so good there are moments where you forget you're watching puppets. One of the most impressive moments for me is when the Rockbiter sees the Nothing approaching, and you can see his eyes widen in visible terror. The effects team had a very enthusiastic acting coach to give them tips on how to make the lip movements on the puppets believably match the dialogue and how to properly animate their faces to convey the emotions they're supposed to be showing, and it all paid off. It's not quite on the same level as the amazing creature effects stuff Jim Henson was able to do in movies like The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth, but there was a huge amount of work that was put into these characters, and that effort definitely helps deliver the movie's story. Speaking of which, for a fantasy film aimed at a younger audience, this film has an incredibly grim, dark, and even apocalyptic tone to its plot. The threat that the Nothing poses is taken grimly seriously. You see so much of Fantasia in complete devastation, and some characters even die, with the movie's most gut-wrenching scene being the death of Atreyu's faithful horse, Artax, who allows himself to drown in a swamp literally called the Swamp of Sadness.
Come on! Artax! Fight against the sadness, Artax! Artax, please. You're letting the sadness of the swamps get to you. You have to try. You have to care. For me. You're my friend. I love you.
The movie is steadfast in this tone. There's not a tonally inappropriate, immersion-shattering bit of forced humor to take away from the movie's stakes. This is back when kids' movies had balls, and didn't pull any punches in giving hard lessons about life. It gives the movie longevity, too, since the darker tone is also more relatable for adult viewers. There's one thing I need to talk about with this movie, and that's regarding its ending. If you've never seen the film before and are sensitive about spoilers, I suggest skipping to this time mark. My final thoughts are that the movie is incredible, charming, emotionally powerful, and very tightly paced. And you should absolutely watch it, especially if you have a fondness for classic fantasy films. Also be wary that the theme song is an earworm that you'll never be able to shake from your subconscious. So the climactic scene of the movie has Atreyu finally meeting the childlike Empress face to face after the Nothing has all but destroyed Fantasia. He's heartbroken, believing to have failed in his quest, but the Empress assures him that he hasn't. See, Atreyu was informed by an oracle in an earlier scene that the only way to stop the Nothing is for the Empress to receive a new name from an Earthling child. And here we find out that that child is Bastion. Yes, that's right. This is where we learn that the Empress knows that she's a character in a book, and that Bastion is the only one with the power to stop the Nothing. A fact which Bastion is totally incredulous of, but eventually manages to come around and believe it. And when the Nothing is mere seconds away from killing the Empress, Bastion finally gives her a name, and that's enough to stop the Nothing for good and restore Fantasia to its former glory. Now, I like to think the name Bastion gave her was the name of his deceased mother, but the movie never explicitly states this. But I feel like it would be consistent with the theme, because that would be an act of sheer inspiration and loving passion that I think would be more than strong enough to stop the Nothing in its tracks. Because the Nothing is the literal primordial embodiment of despair, apathy, and dread. The movie clearly tells us that it's the total desolation of creativity and ambition. Whenever people abandon their dreams and aspirations of fulfillment and happiness in their lives, and instead wallow away as empty drones, living day to day with no investment in anything, they are fueling the Nothing. And, as the Gamork says, people who have no dreams, no passions, not a single thing at all to live for, are easy to control. They make for easy pawns for evil people to manipulate and attain power from. So I feel like the power of creativity, imagination, and joy that the movie tries to impress on its viewers goes even deeper, and implies that those aspects are also the very essence of the human spirit. For a movie with a giant sneezing turtle, giant sphinx statues with laser eyes, and a narcoleptic bat, these themes reach pretty deep. But that's the main reason why I cherish this movie so much, because it shows you that dreams are important, and even if you can't fulfill them, you use your creativity to make new dreams, because life itself is its own never-ending story.
I think I got it all figured. You see, you're a gorilla. And you're as ugly as a buzzard. Not only that, I think you're as dumb as a backward jackass.
Who is more dumb? Me or the man who lets himself get cheated by friends?
Now we're mixing things up with a Western adventure movie. And while there are a decent amount of them to choose from, I'd like to shed some light on a lesser-known little gem from 1971 called Red Sun. Set in 1860, an ambassador from Japan travels to the United States to deliver a gift to the president. His train ride is abruptly stopped when a gang of vicious outlaws led by an evil boss named Ghosh robs the train and steals the Japanese ambassador's gift, an ornate sword, and kills one of the ambassador's samurai bodyguards. The surviving bodyguard, Kuroda Jubei, swears vengeance on Ghosh, while the surviving inhabitants of the train discovered the unconscious body of Link, Ghosh's partner in crime, whom he betrayed to have the wealth of the train's gold all to himself. Link is reluctantly partnered with Kuroda as the two of them embark on a mission to get the sword back from Ghosh, with Kuroda being given a week to find the sword and kill Ghosh for the death of the other bodyguard, with the progress of his days emblemized with a small linen rope with 7 knots in it that he must undo with each passing day, as Kuroda is honor-bound to commit harakiri if he doesn't fulfill his mission within that time frame. Let's talk about the cast of this movie. Because man, what a cast it is. In the role of Link, you've got famous Hollywood badass Charles Bronson, known for his roles in many westerns and action movies like the Death Wish franchise. And in the role of Kuroda, you got my man, the most legendary samurai actor of all time, Toshiro Mifune, making his second appearance on my list. This was one of his first ever English-speaking roles, and when you've seen so much of him in Kurosawa movies, it can definitely feel strange to see him speaking English, but he does a great job, and he definitely brings the same level of intensity and screen presence to this role as any of his others. The villain, Gauche, is played by renowned international French actor Alain Delon, who's been in a ton of great French movies, but probably his most famous role was playing the main character in the late 50s French noir masterpiece, Les Samouraïs. How's that for irony? The main star of Les Samouraïs is now here, stealing from a bunch of samurai. The main female lead, Christina, is played by the original Bond girl, Ursula Andress, who plays sort of a femme fatale character for Bronson while adding a good amount of sex appeal to the story. With such an impressive cast of actors, it's sad that this film isn't more well known. Apart from the amazing cast, it's got well-directed action, a plot that moves at a steady pace, and an overall sense of fun and subtle camp that's reminiscent of the early James Bond films, which is fitting since the director, Terrence Young, directed several of the original Connery Bond pictures. One of my favorite moments is when Link and Kuroda find a group of Mexican bandits attacking a small farmstead. They decide to set a trap for them. One of the bandits comes into the barn, hoping to find an attractive young woman to force himself on. He looks behind one of the flaps, and then he finds a fucking samurai that runs him through with a katana. Imagine you're this guy, expecting to find another scared family member, or at the very worst another bandit in hiding, and instead, you find a warrior from a country on the other side of the planet ready to skewer you with a sword that you've never even seen before. That's part of the brilliance of this movie. It embraces the silliness of its concept in a sincere and straightforward manner. Mifune and Bronson kick a lot of ass in a very buddy cop sort of dynamic. They start out against each other, with Bronson trying to either kill Mifune or shake him off his trail.
Someday I'm gonna catch you without all that hardware.
One of the funniest scenes is when Bronson tries to fistfight Mifune and instead gets tossed around like a bag of potatoes for the next minute and a half.
You think I'm gonna hit a man who can't even make a fist? You think you could do that again?
Almost certainly.
At the end of which, he still manages to come out looking badass.
Looks to me like you're getting tired. I'll tell you what. We'll call it a draw.
Eventually, the two of them learn to work together as a team very effectively, and honestly, the idea of a cowboy and a samurai as an action movie duo is a concept that you think would have happened more, considering that both westerns and samurai Chanbara pictures share such a strong connection with each other. Akira Kurosawa, who popularized the samurai genre, was influenced by Golden Age Hollywood westerns, particularly the films of John Ford, and then in the 60s, directors like Sergio Leone and Sergio Corbucci made new westerns that were more gritty and violent, that took heavy influence from Kurosawa's movies. As the famous story goes, the film that kick-started the spaghetti western phenomenon, A Fistful of Dollars, was a nearly scene-for-scene American western retelling of Kurosawa's Yojimbo. So a pairing of this nature makes sense, especially when you consider that Mifune was one of the main stars in Seven Samurai, while Bronson also played one of the main characters in the US-made remake called The Magnificent Seven. So in a way, it's like fate itself arranged for these two badass leading men to lead a movie together. And they do, in fact, do it together. Neither one of them outshines the other. If this movie were made today, Mifune's character would be the only competent one of the two, while Bronson would be a useless clown. Because Hollywood today hates competent and assertive white men as lead characters. But it also bears mentioning that during this movie's time period, it would have been easy for Mifune to get sidelined constantly due to him being a foreign actor, but neither outcome happens. They both get plenty of badass moments, and they're both treated with respect and dignity, and they're both shown to have their individual flaws and strengths. Truly one of the most underrated team-ups in film history. That's Red Sun for you, an overlooked gem from the early 70s. You will believe that a cowboy and a samurai can kick ass together.
You know what old Jack Burton always says at a time like this? Old Jack always says, what the hell?
At number 7, we have another 80s classic, Big Trouble in Little China, directed by John Carpenter, a director who was on a blazing hot streak during this decade. I'm serious, in the 80s, Carpenter was just a machine gun that fired rock-solid cinematic classics. The Fog, Escape from New York, The Thing, Christine, Starman, this movie, They Live, Prince of Darkness. The guy was on a roll. Carpenter is a director with more talent in his pinky finger than most filmmakers have in their whole physical frame. And this film is a perfect showcase of that. Our hero is the lovable, sarcastic truck driver, Jack Burton, played by the phenomenal Kurt Russell, who travels to San Francisco's Chinatown district to meet up with his close friend Wang, played by Dennis Dunn. When Wang's fiancée is kidnapped by a street gang, the two of them follow the gang to the back alleys of Chinatown, where they find themselves caught in the middle of a war between two underground Chinese gangs, and learn that Wang's fiancée is to be married to an immortal, wraith-like sorcerer named Lo Pan, who needs the blood of a green-eyed girl to make himself human again in order to appease the evil god he worships. The rest of the movie is a non-stop ride of outlandish set pieces and awesome action sequences, involving 3 guys in straw hats that control the weather, a fleshy orb with eyes and tentacles that looks like a damn beholder from Dungeons & Dragons, a Sasquatch, giant man-eating worms, and way more craziness. The thing that makes this film really work is the characters. They're the main grounding force to help the audience adjust to all the chaos that unfolds. Kurt Russell really shows his range here. Fresh off of playing stoic, taciturn badasses like Snake Plissken and R.J. McCready, he fits into the role of Jack Burton like a glove, with his non-stop wisecracks and perpetual John Wayne impression.
When some wild-eyed, 8-foot-tall maniac grabs your neck, taps the back of your favorite head up against a barroom wall, and he looks you crooked in the eye, and he asks you if you've paid your dues, well, you just stare that big sucker right back in the eye, and you remember what old Jack Burton always says at a time like that. Have you paid your dues, Jack? Yes, sir, the check is in the mail.
Carpenter said the idea behind Jack was to make a sidekick who thinks he's a leading man, which I think is doing the character a disservice. While Jack does get his ass kicked, and his buddy Wang is shown to be the more overall competent one, he's not useless by any means. He contributes to the plot, and without giving away too much, he is the one who ends up saving the day. And honestly, what Jack lacks in combat ability or luck, he makes up for in courage. This is a guy who shit talks the main bad guys to their face constantly.
Oh, body. And all I need is a woman, Mr. Burton. A special kind of woman with dragon green eyes to make me whole again, young again, so that I may rule the universe from beyond this grave.
Qingdai, the god of the east. Who, him? This guy?
No, not me, Mr. Burton. My demon, the god I must appease in order to regain my heart, my blood. To a girl with green eyes, to satisfy Qingdai, a girl brave enough to embrace the naked blade. And when I find her, I will marry her.
Never!
Then Qingdai will be happy and my curse will be lifted.
You can go off and rule the universe from beyond the grave.
Indeed!
Or check into a psycho ward, whichever comes first, huh?
Jack, will you...
Jack, what? I'm supposed to buy this shit? 2,000 years and he can't find one broad to fit the bill? Come on, Dave, you must be doing something seriously wrong.
And he doesn't hesitate to throw himself into a fight even if he knows he can't win. He's got huge balls. One thing to note, Kurt Russell originally auditioned for the role of Han Solo way back in the day. And while he obviously didn't get the role, this movie I think offers a strong glimpse into what that might have been like.
All right, we're almost out of here. Now, from here on, it gets pretty normal. Offices, storerooms, a nice false front. I count to 3. I open that door, we move out.
Everybody got that?
Ready? Follow the leader. 1, 2, 3. We we may be trapped.
He's got that same sardonic, charming charisma and that same playful flirtation with the female lead that made characters like Han Solo and Indiana Jones so memorable. Dennis Dunn, who plays Wang, also does a great job, especially considering he had very little martial arts experience before starring in the film. He reminds me personally of some second-generation Asian friends of mine who work their asses off, but are really just cool and charming guys to have as friends. He and Kurt have phenomenal chemistry, and their friendship is the real emotional anchor of the film. You've also got Kim Cattrall as the female lead, Gracie Law, who's alright. She makes for great eye candy, which is more than you can say about Kim Cattrall these days.
I said I was coming.
I'd go with you, but...
I know, there's a problem with your face.
The other notable actor to mention is James Hong, who plays Lo Pan. I think this was one of his first major starring roles, since before this, he mainly played minor roles in movies like Airplane and Blade Runner. His presence and charisma is so strong, I can't imagine any other actor playing the character. He's both scary and
Who are these people? Friends of yours, huh? Now, this really pisses me off to no end.
I especially like the way he calls Jack Mr. Burton like he's a James Bond villain or something.
You? I don't get this at all. I thought Lo Pan...
Shut up, Mr. Burton. You are not brought upon this world to get it.
It just adds to the movie's fun. The special effects are also a treat. Both the awesome makeup and creature effects by Steve Johnson and the incredible optical effects by Richard Edlund, responsible for the optical effects for Raiders of the Lost Ark, Poltergeist, and Ghostbusters. The cinematography from Dean Cundy, who also worked on The Thing, Halloween, Back to the Future, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Jurassic Park, several other classics, also makes this movie come alive with a colorful neon 80s comic book-like aesthetic. There's so many awesome lines, too.
Son of a bitch must pay.
This movie's just the complete package. I can't think of any flaws with it. It just kicks ass. It's funny, exciting, scary in some moments, and it makes you wish that Carpenter was treated better by Hollywood. If you want a crazy 80s Asian flavored action adventure romp, you can't do much better. Just a word to the wise, don't ever steal this man's truck.
Here's to the Army and Navy and the battles they have won. Here's to America's colors, the colors that never run.
May the wings of liberty never lose a feather.
Let loose the Kraken!
For this part of the list, we're doing something a little different, in that we're not talking about one film, but two. That's right, it's a Hellenic double feature with two of the greatest sword and sandal epics of the 20th century, Jason and the Argonauts from 1963 and Clash of the Titans from 1981. Both massive budget, massive scale adaptations of Greek mythology, and both featuring tons of beautiful and spellbinding effects from the god of stop motion himself, Ray Harryhausen, one of my biggest heroes. First off, Jason and the Argonauts. The film adapts the legend of the Argonautica, which centers around the journey of the Greek hero, Jason, who seeks to inherit the throne of the kingdom of Thessaly from which he was displaced as a child. To earn his place as king, he's given a quest by the gods of Olympus to retrieve an artifact called the Golden Fleece, located in the land of Colchis on the far side of the world. In order to fulfill this mission, he builds a mighty ship called the Argo and assembles a crew of the finest sailors and warriors from all over Greece. Jason and his newly formed Argonauts set out to find the Golden Fleece, along with all the perils that the journey entails, including a living skyscraper-sized bronze statue, Talos, a duo of evil harpies, a hydra, and more wondrous powers of the old Greek world. This movie pushed the envelope of what was possible to achieve with stop-motion effects and, honestly, special effects in general. Not since King Kong debuted exactly 30 years earlier had the stop-motion technique broken so much new ground. One only needs to look at the Talos and the Hydra to see why. These two creatures had to convey immense size, believable movement, coordination, and characterization all at the same time. No animator had ever brought characters like these to life before, so Harryhausen pushed himself and the art of stop motion further than it had ever gone. With all the heads of the Hydra acting in unison while also acting of their own temperament and accord, and the great Talos moving and shifting its hulking bronze body in a way that conveys both monstrous size, power, and personality. But of course, the most iconic scene that everyone remembers is the battle between the Argonauts and the Skeletons. The choreography and precision from both the director and from Harryhausen during the animation process was simply unprecedented for any big Hollywood film at the time. Just look at how well timed and in sync the actors are with the skeletons. It's simply jaw-dropping. This scene is the culmination of thousands of hours of planning, precise staging, and blocking on the part of the actors and director, and rigorous concentration and labor on the part of Harryhausen. All that hard work, combined with Ray's natural sense of animating fluid movement, makes this a film for the history books. An exemplary piece of fantasy cinema that inspired whole generations of filmmakers. If Willis O'Brien was the blacksmith that forged and smelted the stop-motion sword, then Harryhausen was the journeyman who refined and polished the blade into a brilliant, blinding, razor-edged sheen. The movie delivers the goods big time in the plot and character department as well, making you invested in all the stuff that happens in between the scenes containing stop-motion spectacle. An essential classic for any self-proclaimed movie lover. Now on to the other film, Clash of the Titans. The film tells the story of the hero Perseus, forced to embark on a journey to rescue his love, the Princess Andromeda, for being sacrificed to a horrible sea monster called the Kraken. To destroy the Kraken, he needs to acquire the severed head of the Gorgon Queen, Medusa, all while trying to evade the wrath of the wicked beast man, Calibos. Honestly, of the two films, I think I prefer Clash of the Titans just a bit more. Why? It comes down to a couple of things. The visual style and more gritty 80s style aesthetic definitely appeals to me more, but there's also things like the musical score that I prefer. No disrespect to Bernard Herrmann's wonderful score for Jason, but Lawrence Rosenthal's music for this movie is just sublime. When it comes to capturing the sense of awe, splendor, and sheer magic of the ancient Greek world, this score hits the mark big time. The cast of actors is more memorable to me too. Not to say that the cast from Jason and the Argonauts was bad, but come on. In this movie you've got iconic Shakespearean stage actor Sir Laurence Olivier playing Zeus. Olivier was actually physically ill during the time of filming, but it doesn't show. He gives Zeus the unmistakable power and authority that you would expect to see from the King of Olympus. Then there's the goddess Thetis, played by the recently departed Maggie Smith, whom all of you Harry Potter fans out there might better recognize as Professor McGonagall. She was also one of the main stars in the hugely popular drama series Downton Abbey. She offers honestly one of the best performances, expressing a pretty vast range of emotions from humor to desperation and even furious anger with little effort. Cool little fact about Thetis. In the myths, she's the mother of none other than the legendary warrior Achilles. I also like the guy who plays Perseus, Harry Hamlin. Though Todd Armstrong, who plays Jason, I think offers a stronger performance, Hamlin's look, his voice, and his overall screen presence feels more recognizable to me whenever I think of Greek heroes.
Have courage, princess. What can it be? 3 circles joined, 2 moons, and a crown.
Tell me.
The answer is a ring. 2 perfect pearls and a circle of gold. The ring of the Lord of the Marsh. The pearl ring of Calibos. Here. On the claw hand of Calibos himself.
And it doesn't hurt that he has a mentor character to bounce off of, who's played by none other than Burgess Meredith, better known as Mickey from the Rocky movies and the Penguin from the 60s Batman series, as well as starring in several episodes of The Twilight Zone. Of the two films, I think Jason and the Argonauts is the better written and structured in terms of plot. Clash of the Titans is a bit too busy in the story department. The whole plot hook with Perseus having to save Andromeda from the Kraken isn't even a thing until pretty much the movie's third act. All the stuff with Calibos kidnapping Andromeda's soul and the riddle and Thetis trying to save him, It makes the movie's plot a bit too convoluted for its own good. It doesn't make the movie bad by any means, far from it. It's still a phenomenal fantasy adventure with lots of memorable moments, and the stuff with Calabas is interesting. All the mythology buffs might also take issue with the liberties that these movies take with the myths as well, since they do take a lot. Some examples being that the fleece in the original myth was guarded by a dragon rather than a hydra, but Harryhausen already made a dragon for a movie that will be showing up later in this list. Also, the Pegasus was not the steed of Perseus, but of Bellerophon, the hero famous for slaying the Chimera. The big one though has got to be the Kraken. In the myths, Andromeda was made to be sacrificed to a sea serpent known as the Cetus. The Kraken is a monster from Scandinavian folklore, and it's frequently depicted as a gigantic cephalopod squid monster that devours ships. Whereas in this movie, it's a semi-humanoid reptilian creature with 4 arms and a fish tail, which I will say is a really cool design. It almost feels like an evolution of the alien creature Ymir from another Harryhausen gem, 20 Million Miles to Earth. Despite the differences, these movies do nail the atmosphere and epic scale that the Greek tales are known for. And these changes I think were made not out of disrespect for the classic myths, but to facilitate the process of filmmaking. The scene in Medusa's temple is my favorite Harryhausen sequence of all time. The suspense and atmosphere of this scene is just fucking incredible. The design of Medusa herself is also one of the coolest visual interpretations of any mythological creature in cinema. With her scaly flesh and entire lower half being a snake tail, it's a visual interpretation of the character that caught on pretty big in future media, let me tell you. The entire scene is a cat and mouse game where Perseus has to figure out a way to spring the trap he needs to take Medusa's head. It's a pure edge-of-your-seat set piece that you will not forget anytime soon. This was Harryhausen's final movie, and he made absolutely sure to end his legendary career with a resounding bang, pulling out all the stops, not just from an animation perspective, but even a pure filmmaking one. Many artists don't get to end their careers on such a high note, but Ray was one of the lucky few, and because of him, we have 2 of the most powerful and enduring visual depictions of the Greek myths in our entire culture, which inspired several other works of media, from animated movies to even video games. One of the most prominent examples being the God of War game series, that is to say the original PS2 and PS3 games set in Greece, not the newer Norse myth-inspired games. These games owe a shit ton to the Harryhausen classics. In God of War 2, one of the bosses you fight is none other than Perseus. And who do they get to do his voice?
But perhaps this is a test. Are you watching me now, sisters? Give me a sign! Am I, the great Perseus, to kill this fallen god to receive an audience with you? Will that allow me to bring my love back from the grasp of Hades himself?
That's right, it's Harry Hamlin, reprising his role decades later. If that wasn't enough, another boss that appears later on is the Kraken, very clearly inspired by the Harryhausen version. There's way more examples of nods to these classics throughout the games that I could spend all day highlighting. The mythical tales of ancient Greece are some of the most critically important fictional stories in all of human history, so it's a pity that this particular realm of mythology has so few noteworthy movies to its name, but these 2 movies do a fantastic job serving as a gateway into the fantasy world of Hellenic antiquity, the same way the ancient poets delivered the tales and exploits of the gods and heroes of their land to willing audiences to ensure their survival. It's my hope that my own word of mouth with these 2 movies will introduce more people to them, to the amazing mythos that spawned them, and the wonderful artist who gave life to these beasts and heroes of legend. Down to the top 5, our next entry, the adventure train will be stopping back in the silent era, with one of the earliest examples of the adventure comedy, The General from 1927, starring the one and only Buster Keaton, one of the most iconic silent film actors who ever lived. Set during the American Civil War, Keaton plays an engineer named Johnny Gray who tries to enlist in the Confederate Army to impress a girl he likes, but he's rejected due to his occupation as an engineer. A year later, a group of Union spies hatch a plot to undermine the Confederate war effort. They steal Johnny's prized train, the General, in a plan to destroy all the railroad bridges on the Tennessee-Georgia border to cut off supply lines to the rebel army. In the process, kidnapping Annabelle, the girl Johnny's in love with. The entire rest of the movie is basically one long chase with Johnny journeying across the entire theater of war to try to get his train and his girl back from the duplicitous Yankee spies. The movie was heavily inspired by a real-life event that happened during the Civil War, known as the Great Locomotive Chase of 1862, in which a group of Union infiltrators stole a train in an attempt to burn all the railroad bridges to deny the Confederate forces supplies and reinforcements. They were eventually thwarted and executed. The General itself was a real train, as it was the train that was stolen. Keaton's character and his girlfriend were of course fictional. Keaton actually wanted to use the real-life train that was involved in the incident, as it was on display at the Chattanooga Railroad Station, but the city officials didn't approve, sadly. It's damn hard to watch this movie without cracking a smile on your face. Everything from the camera work to the jokes and gags and the jaw-dropping stunt work makes this film just as wonderful, hilarious, and exciting as it was 98 years ago. The key ingredient for me that makes Buster Keaton's brand of comedy so ingenious is the contrast between his own deadpan, unassuming personality and the crazy and wacky shit that happens all around him. Despite everything that goes wrong, he still manages to keep cool and maintain that same look on his face. He's the straight man in a world gone mad. That's the thing that makes his movies endure for so long and remain endlessly funny and charming to this very day. That and the stunts. When we talk about batshit crazy Daredevil movie stars, most people think of Tom Cruise or Jackie Chan, both of whom have a huge amount of talented balls to be sure. But both they and all other self-respecting, courageous action stars pray at the altar of Keaton. He's the originator of the trend. The same way he's made millions laugh at his hijinks for generations, he himself laughed in the face of death more than a few times, with lots of moments in this film alone that could have ended very badly for him. This movie feels like Murphy's Law imprinted on celluloid. Everything that can go wrong does. One of the best scenes is the one where Keaton is trying to load a mortar to try to derail the Union train ahead of him. He puts the wrong amount of gunpowder in, and the cannonball fires with very weak power in a perfect circular arc right into the cab of the train where he's standing. To actually achieve this shot, the lead effects technician had to measure the exact amount of gunpowder needed to make the ball fly at this speed and at that angle. So Keaton overloads the mortar with gunpowder, his foot gets stuck on the coupling and severs the connection with the car that the mortar is mounted on. The mortar's barrel drops down to an angle where it's pointed directly at Keaton and the car of the train he's climbing on. A perfect oh shit moment to make the audience clench the edge of their seat all the harder. If that wasn't enough, Keaton's foot gets snagged again by a chain. Keep in mind that the mortar is on a fuse, so there's a very clear ticking clock here. You think that both Keaton and the entire train are going to get blown to pieces, but thanks to sheer dumb luck, the railroad curves at an angle to the left right as the fuse burns out, and the mortar fires in a perfectly staged shot where the Union soldiers at the far railroad crossing get a nasty wake-up call. The entire movie is like this. It's just a never-ending series of high-octane chases, with action set pieces that serve almost like a Rube Goldberg-style series of causes and effects to put Keaton in even more and more danger. Despite all the chaos and destruction happening around him, he still has that endearing stone face. Brief spoiler alert, you can skip to this time mark if you don't want me to ruin the ending. The movie's big climactic event has the Union train, the Texas, falling down into a gorge with the bridge falling with it. Nothing you see here is fake. No miniatures, no composites, no green screen. The crew actually collapsed a real bridge with a real train on it, and it's incredible. In terms of the scale for both its time period and, hell, even today, it's one of the greatest explosive moments in all of film. Pretty much everything you see in this movie is for real. There were a few shots I initially thought were rear screen projection, But there's not even that. Rear screen projection wasn't developed until the 30s. All of these actors were really performing on top of speeding trains. If that wasn't enough, after the scene where the bridge falls, we get probably one of the first big battle scenes in cinema. An incredible behind-the-scenes story to note. During the filming of this battle, a forest fire broke out a few miles north of the filming location. So Keaton and the producers stopped filming, rounded up all the cast and crew, and got them all to help with the relief efforts to stop the fire. They still managed to complete the scene on time, too. Just goes to show you that Keaton wasn't just a professional and a brilliant comedian, but a compassionate and noble soul as well. He really deserved better. Amazingly, this movie was not well received upon its initial release. I guess audiences and critics didn't like the idea of a war comedy. It might also be the case that some real-life Civil War veterans didn't like the idea as well. Remember, this movie's release was only 60 years removed from the war itself, so there were still men alive who fought in it. The point is that this movie was unfairly maligned on its release, and once sound movies became popular, people treated Keaton's work like it was obsolete. Thankfully, other people over time found value in his films and worked diligently to preserve them for future generations. You gotta remember, folks, a lot of movies from this era are considered lost. The negatives that they were burned on were not made to last and were often discarded by theater managers after their first run. Lots of people in the 20s never would have thought that the movies of that time would have a loving and passionate audience a full century later. So the fact that we have as many of these movies available today that we do is not something that we should ever take for granted. An added bonus is that this movie is not only a thrilling great time, it's also short, clocking in at an hour and 19 minutes, and you can watch it for free on YouTube. The perks of being in the public domain, so there's really no excuse not to see it. Other Keaton classics like Our Hospitality, Steamboat Bill Jr., and more also come recommended, but this is the film from him that is an absolute must-watch. Keaton himself said that it was his favorite film that he ever made, and if that's not a worthy accolade, I don't know what is. One of my all-time favorite anime franchises has got to be Lupin III. Originating as a manga created in the late 60s by author and artist Kazuhiko Kato under the pen name Monkey Punch, it was soon adapted into a wildly successful anime series that began its run in the early 70s and had several continuations throughout the 70s and 80s, and still has shows and movies being made to this day. The series follows its titular protagonist, Arsène Lupin III, the world's greatest thief, who is the grandson of the famous literary French thief Arsène Lupin, who was created in the early 20th century by French author Maurice Leblanc. Joining him is an amazing and memorable supporting cast, including his right-hand man, Daisuke Jigen, a gruff, hard-boiled, chain-smoking badass whose skills with a revolver put the Waco Kid to shame, and he has some of the best lines and quotes ever.
Jigen, can you see with your hat like that?
Guess we'll find out.
Admit it, you were blinded by diamonds and you betrayed us. Just like a typical woman.
When it comes to romance and jewels, I don't really give a rat's ass. Now, fine wine, that I'm passionate about.
What's contained herein would be wasted on a fool. What the hell does that mean?
It means you should let me open it.
Very funny, Jigen.
He's my favorite character. Then you have the third member of the group, Goemon, a stoic samurai warrior who's the main muscle, and like Lupin is also the descendant of a famous thief, that being the real-life Japanese highwayman Ishikawa Goemon. The on and off fourth member of the group is the sexy and unpredictable Fujiko Mine. Originally created as a Bond girl type character in the manga, she's more of an independent femme fatale who has something of an on and off again romance with Lupin and a love-hate relationship with the other members of the group. Though she can kick ass and blow shit up well when the situation calls, she prefers to use subterfuge and use her sex appeal to manipulate people into doing what she wants. She's also one of the main characters used in the series marketing for obvious reasons. Then there's the fifth recurring character, the Interpol Inspector Zenigata, who serves as Lupin's foil and rival. He wants only one thing, to arrest Lupin and his gang, and he'll stop at nothing to do it, resulting in an eternally entertaining Tom and Jerry-like chase dynamic between the two men that's honestly one of the hallmarks of the whole series. Lupin himself lives for adventures and thrills, and Zenigata constantly gunning for him only adds to that excitement. The amazing characters coupled with the show's style that mixes a heap of 60s and 70s movie influences like James Bond, The Pink Panther, Get Smart, Ocean's 11, and more, while also making its own unique identity. And you have a bona fide classic of Japanese media. Easy to see why it's lasted for over 60 years, and it's had plenty of films to come out over the years. But this part of the list focuses only on the second film in the franchise, which is 1979's Castle of Cagliostro. The film opens with Lupin and Jigen fleeing the authorities after a successful heist, only to find out that the money they stole is counterfeit. Lupin deduces that the fake money originated from the fictional European country of Cagliostro, where he and Jigen travel to next. While there, the two thieves uncover a plot by the evil Count of Cagliostro to arrange a marriage with the princess, whom Lupin has a personal history with, in order to attain her royal signet ring to complete a puzzle that will lead the Count to the prophesized treasure of Cagliostro. All the while, Lupin vows to save the princess out of a sense of nobility that mystifies everyone in his crew, while also trying to blow the whistle on the Count's counterfeiting operation. The director of this movie is a man whose name I'm sure everyone will recognize, none other than legendary Japanese animation filmmaker Hayao Miyazaki. Not only was he director, but this film marks his first ever directing credit, and what a hell of an introduction. Miyazaki had directed a few episodes of the original anime series, so he was by no means a newcomer to the franchise. While the anime was often a comedic and satirical globe-trotting action and espionage romp in most episodes, this movie puts the Lupin gang into more of a romantic, swashbuckling adventure with a clear bad guy and princess to save, and it does it well. This is a fantastic movie. If you're wondering whether you need to be familiar with the anime or manga to enjoy this movie, wonder no more. Miyazaki does a phenomenal job establishing who these characters are in very timely and efficient ways. You can come into this movie as a newcomer to the franchise and instantly know who is who and follow the plot just fine. One of my favorite aspects of the film is the fact that Lupin and Zenigata form a temporary truce to fight back against the Count and expose his counterfeit industry. While I do maintain this movie is friendly to newcomers of the series, the idea of these two working together is maximized in its novelty when you have the full context of the relationship they have in the anime and manga. This movie does a good job showing just how smart Zenigata is as well. There's a part where Lupin's trying to sneak into the castle and Zenigata, Sherlock Holmes style, deduces the most likely entry point that Lupin would use, and he comes within a hair's reach of finding him without even realizing it, showing just how Zenigata earned Lupin's respect as a cunning rival over the years. All the characters in this movie are shown to be intelligent, including the villains, which heightens the stakes tremendously. The action sequences are spectacular too, with very smooth and seamlessly moving animation. Speaking of which, this is one of the few Miyazaki films to not be animated by Studio Ghibli, since Miyazaki and fellow director Isao Takahata wouldn't form the famous animation house until 1985. The animation work for Castle of Cagliostro was done by an animation house that, while not as well known as Ghibli, for my money they're equally as important. The studio in question being Tokyo Movie Shinsha, or TMS for short. While TMS is known for doing the animation for the Lupin III franchise, as well as lots of other famous anime, they've done the animation for lots of Western cartoons, both shows and movies, with some big examples being the 1989 film version of Little Nemo, Inspector Gadget, The Real Ghostbusters, Animaniacs, DuckTales, and more. The big one for me being that they animated several episodes of Batman the Animated Series, as well as creating the show's iconic intro. So yeah, TMS is awesome, and their work on this movie is no exception. The animation highlight for me is the sequence where Lupin is stumbling across the rooftop. It's exciting and hilarious just how lucky he gets, with more than a few moments of cartoon logic at play, since there are things he does here that would be impossible for a real person to accomplish. One thing I also feel doesn't get enough praise would have to be the backdrops. Backdrops are critically important, I feel, for immersing people into the setting of an animated film, and this one excels at that. I love the gothic European atmosphere this movie creates, especially in the climax. It makes me wonder if the visuals of this film might have had an influence on the Castlevania games, especially with the Dracula-like outfit the Count is wearing in the final scenes. The anime draws inspiration from lots of genres, from crime epics, heist movies, spy movies, and even film noir. So why not have a story in this universe that's a gothic swashbuckling adventure in the vein of something like The Three Musketeers? Another great thing about this movie is that the experience is not lessened whether you choose to watch it in Japanese or English. There have been 2 English dubs over the years, and both of them are excellent. Although the earlier of the 2 dubs, they call Lupin Wolf for some reason, which makes sense, I guess, since Lupin literally means wolf. Either way, it's important to note, because a well-made English dub for an anime this old is not something to be taken lightly. That's another thing you can merit towards Miyazaki. He always had maximum quality control for the English localizations for all of his films. Hell, that's why so many of the Ghibli movies have huge-name Hollywood stars doing the English versions. I mean, people look at me funny when I tell them the English version of Princess Mononoke has Billy Bob Thornton and Minnie Driver in it. While there aren't megastars doing the voices here, the quality of the performances is still strong regardless. And it's a breath of fresh air since English localizations of anime during this specific time period were less than great. So even if you're not an anime fan or a Lupin III fan, this is still just a wonderful movie that anyone can enjoy. And it's a great look into the early work of one of Japan's most celebrated storytellers. There is probably not a more well-known legendary figure from medieval times than Robin of Locksley, better known by you and me as Robin Hood. If you have a pulse, there's a good chance you know the story of Robin Hood, the dashing gallant rogue who steals from the rich and gives to the poor, the fearless archer who led a revolt against a corrupt authority headed by his famed arch-nemesis, the Sheriff of Nottingham, the hero of the lower class, the champion of the little guy. He is one of the most beloved iconic figures in all of human history. Though it's unclear whether or not the character was based on a real person, the tales of his daring heroics have been chronicled and retold for nearly 700 years, becoming one of the most classic heroic archetypes in fictional writing. The list of characters inspired by the Robin Hood legend is nearly endless. To pulp heroes like Zorro, to modern-day comic book characters like DC's Green Arrow. And with a character this famous, you can bet that there's been more than a few movies made about him. But the one I'm focusing on for this list is perhaps the definitive film that established the visual iconography for the character and his world, 1938's The Adventures of Robin Hood. The film serves as something of a gestalt of the several Robin Hood legends that exist. In the year 1191, the English king Richard the Lionheart is taken prisoner by the Duke of Austria while returning to England from the Crusades. Upon this news, Richard's power-hungry younger brother, Prince John, names himself the ruler of England with the help of his right-hand man, the corrupt knight Sir Guy of Gisborne. To sate his greed and lust for wealth and power, he overtaxes and overworks the Saxon inhabitants of England, making them think that it's all for the cause of producing a ransom for Richard's release. Prince John and Sir Guy's exploitation of the Saxon people is further complicated when a former knight, Robin of Locksley, known to the common folk as Robin Hood, assembles a small army of bandits to fight back against the corrupt regime and preserve England for Richard's return. There's so many things to praise with this movie, I hardly know where to begin. For one thing, the look of the film is still beautiful even more than 80 years on. This was one of the earliest Technicolor films, released a whole year before the process was made popular by The Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind, and they make the most of it with lots of super colorful costumes, elaborately decorated sets, and gorgeously shot location scenes. There's so much gritty, dirty, and colorless media with medieval settings that gets made nowadays that it feels fresh to see a film with that setting that's so vibrant and really runs with that storybook fairy tale aesthetic. The movie's got a hell of a great cast, too. Prince John is played by British actor Claude Rains, better known as the Invisible Man from the Universal film, as well as several other Universal horror roles. Guy of Gisborne is played by the brilliant Basil Rathbone, a hell of a great British actor, probably best known for being one of the most prolific actors to play Sherlock Holmes, appearing as the famous detective in over 16 films. And of course, in the role of the legendary rogue himself is Errol Flynn, in a performance that set the standard for swashbuckling, cocky movie heroes to come. Errol Flynn is to Robin Hood what Chris Reeve is to Superman. It's one of the most perfect fusions between actor and character that's ever been achieved. Everything about Flynn's portrayal, to his expressions, his mannerisms, to his clothes, emanates the essence of what you think of when you think of Robin Hood. Everything from his green tights to his triangular pointed cap, his mustache and goatee. This is the iconic, codified version of the character that has resonated for nearly a century. From the countless parody movies to the immensely famous cartoon versions like the Looney Tunes short and the 70s Disney film, all of those things pay homage to this 1938 film. But even beyond that, this is just an expertly paced film with a great 3-act structure, and it even has a really well done romance for its time. In a lot of 30s films, the romance is rushed. The two characters fall in love the second they lay eyes on each other, because I guess the writers think the 90-minute runtime won't allow for more development. But the romance between Robin Hood and Lady Marian is actually given a fair amount of breathing room. They take the time to get to know each other, and Marian herself has a clear arc that ends with her realizing that she's on the wrong side and in love. When they actually do have romantic scenes together, it feels earned, which I think goes a long way to help the audience root more for him. And, well, Robin Hood is just a great hero to root for. No matter what you may think of Errol Flynn himself and his various real-life controversies, he instills the character with a pure, sincere sense of nobility, compassion, and courage to stand up to injustice. He's also a huge smartass, armed with a razor-sharp wit and ability to give stinging retorts to threats or insults.
Such impudence must support a mighty appetite.
True enough, Your Highness. We Saxons have little to fatten on by the time your tax gatherers are through. Be seated, gentlemen. No need to stand on ceremony on my account.
So you think you're overtaxed, eh?
Overtaxed, overworked, and paid off with a knife, a club, or a rope.
Why, you speak treason.
Fluently.
He was the Han Solo of his day. In addition to the Technicolor, I feel this movie did a lot to push the envelope of action sequences in movies. There's some really impressive stunt work, some of which was actually done by Errol Flynn himself. The sword fighting scenes are a huge highlight as well. The final fight between Robin Hood and Guy of Gisborne is an important fight scene in Hollywood history. So many cliches are popularized here, from the two characters fighting on a stairwell to this awesome moment where you see their shadows projected on the pillar. One big thing about this scene too that I don't see many people talk about is the skill gap between the two actors. Basil Rathbone, who plays Sir Guy, was an Olympic-class fencer, being a 2-time champion in the British Army, whereas Errol Flynn comparatively had way less experience, most of it being what he learned for his movie roles, and if you watch the scene closely, you can clearly tell the difference. Sir Guy's movements, his sword strokes, and parries seemed effortless, instinctive, and perfectly measured, whereas Robin Hood's style seems a bit more sloppy and unrefined in comparison. This gives the fight a lot of tension, because you feel like at any moment Robin Hood could die, which is what you want. Nobody wants a movie where the hero is always on top and just beats everyone with ease. We want the hero to struggle and be pushed to his limits by dangerous, incompetent villains. That's good drama. That's good storytelling. There's been lots of other film versions of the Robin Hood legend, all trying to make their own unique mark on it in the same league as this one, but none have succeeded. This movie is just too classic and too famous. It created the new default image of the character in everyone's head. When you hear the name Robin Hood, you think of Errol Flynn, or you think of the Disney version, which was inspired by Errol Flynn. For the penultimate entry on this list, we're returning once again to the world of Mr. Ray Harryhausen, with his first ever outing in the fantasy adventure genre, 1958's The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. The film is a loose adaptation of the stories of Sinbad the Sailor, the famous Arabian captain from one of the many chapters in the 1001 Arabian Nights. The film features Sinbad and the crew of his ship on a quest to restore the love of his life, the Princess Parissa, to full size after being shrunken by an evil wizard named Sakura, a fact which they're ignorant of since Sakura accompanies them on the quest to his island. The quest proves to be immensely perilous, as they run afoul of a Cyclops, a rock, and a dragon chained to a wall inside the island's cave system. As stated before, this was Harryhausen's first ever venture into the realm of fantasy after a string of memorable sci-fi monster movies. It was also the first ever color film he'd worked on. While this is a wonderful film with a tight runtime, tighter pacing, a gorgeous swelling score by Bernard Herrmann, enjoyable acting performances from the main cast, and of course, the unmistakable magic of Harryhausen's creatures, there's not a lot I can really say about this film that I haven't said about other films like Clash of the Titans or Jason. There is, however, a very big reason I included this film not only on the list, but this high on it. It's because, essentially, this movie changed my life. If you ask most people what the first film they ever saw in their life was, a lot of them probably wouldn't be able to answer, but I'm not one of those people. I can say, without a single lingering doubt, that my earliest all-time memory of experiencing a film in my 32 years of living on this earth is this one. There are so many shots and scenes that are permanently burned into my mind, and I remember at kindergarten age having a nightmare about being stuck in a cave with a Cyclops chasing me on one side and a dragon facing me on the other. It wasn't until I saw this movie again in my teens that I knew for a fact where that dream had come from, because that scene is in there. The other scene that stuck with me forever is the one where Sinbad and his men are in the cage and the Cyclops is roasting his first mate on a spit over a fire.
Sinbad! Sinbad, help me! Help!
Lend me a hand. Maybe I can reach the latch.
I remember being upset and disturbed by how unsettling the whole thing was, with the Cyclops' low rumbling and the guy screaming and crying for help. This may have been the first time I was ever scared by a movie as well. Throughout this list, I tried keeping my selections as diverse as possible, trying to incorporate movies depicting as many different eras, mythologies, and subgenres of adventure as possible. But this movie is an exception to that rule, despite already including an Arabian-themed fantasy film with Thief of Baghdad and 2 other Harryhausen flicks already. This movie gets a slot because of its importance to me as an individual. Without experiencing this film at such a young age, I'd probably have never developed a passion for monsters, fantasy, or storytelling. That's not to say that the movie itself isn't worth seeing outside of my own experience. Make no mistake, it's a great film that gives you lots of monsters, adventure, and cool fantasy stuff in a pretty brisk hour and 30-minute runtime. Sinbad is a badass and cool protagonist, and the villain Sakura is delightfully evil. You can also see the creative roots of future Harryhausen creatures in this movie. There's a scene where Sinbad fights a skeleton that basically served as a practice run to prepare Ray for the scene in Jason and the Argonauts. There's a scene where Sakura casts a spell on a woman that transforms her into a weird snake creature for a magical demonstration. Her multiple arms, I think, may have been a precursor to the Hydra from Jason, but her entire lower half being a snake tail, I think definitely influenced the creation of Medusa from Clash of the Titans. This movie is the first installment of a trilogy as well, with the sequel movies being The Golden Voyage of Sinbad from 1973 and Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger from 1977. These movies aren't quite as good as Seventh Voyage, but they all still feature more amazing stop-motion goodness from Harryhausen, with Golden Voyage notably featuring a griffin, a centaur, and a 6-armed Kali statue, and Eye of the Tiger has even more, with a missing Link-type creature who fights a saber-toothed tiger, along with a bronze mechanical Minotaur. Fun fact, in some shots the Minotaur is a guy in a suit, and the guy wearing the suit is none other than Chewbacca himself, Peter Mayhew, who starred in this movie at the same time as Star Wars. So yeah, that's Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. Probably the film that's made the biggest impact on me as a person and a creator of content. But still a great film outside of that. Ray, wherever you are now, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for helping to stoke my passion for both the ancient past and the realms of gods and monsters. I seriously doubt I would be the same without your incredible artistry. Rest well, my friend.
Let me tell you of the days of high adventure.
Know then, O Prince, that between the time when the Star Wars gripped the culture in a vice and the rise of the sons of Tolkien and Martin, there was an age undreamed of. When fantasy films were at their most diverse, science fantasy worlds with Campbellian heroes battling with hordes of faceless troops to topple monstrous tyrants, and sword and sorcery worlds with buxom women and thickly muscled European athletes occupying the leading roles, all of which were precipitated by one film. Hither came Conan, the Cimmerian, black-haired, sullen-eyed, sword in hand, a thief, a reaver, a slayer, with gigantic melancholies and gigantic mirth, to tread the jeweled thrones of the earth beneath his sandaled feet. Anyone who knows me and my channel knew that this film would show up at some point. My number one slot goes to Conan the Barbarian from 1982, directed by maverick Hollywood filmmaker John Milius, and adapted from the famous pulp fantasy character created by famous Texan author Robert E. Howard. The film, of course, stars the iconic bodybuilder turned actor turned politician Arnold Schwarzenegger as the titular barbarian, in the role that would make him a recognizable name in Hollywood. Without Conan, we wouldn't have The Terminator, Commando, Predator, Total Recall, and way more classics. I remember a time where nobody ever talked about this movie, and it was seen as just a dumb, schlocky 80s sword and sandals movie, only noteworthy for starting Schwarzenegger's career. But time has been kind to it, and my own feelings have been vindicated in recent times by other YouTubers and even major Hollywood directors. Better late than never, because this movie is truly something special. Set during the mythical prehistoric Hyborian Age, the film follows Conan from his time as a kid, seeing his entire family and village slaughtered in front of him by a wicked warlord and sorcerer named Thulsa Doom, played by the recently departed James Earl Jones. Don't worry, we'll get to him. Conan spends the rest of his childhood as a slave and is made into a gladiator in his early adult years, before being set free and living as a thief and bandit before an opportunity presents itself for him to find Thulsa Doom and begin a quest for revenge. Joining him is a kick-ass supporting cast with the Hyrcanian archer Subotai, played by Hawaiian surfer turned actor Jerry Lopez, who is a close friend of John Milius, who is also a huge lover of surfing, to the point where he made a whole movie about it, called Big Wednesday, which was where Lopez and Milius first became friends. Lopez delivers the goods when it comes to the action scenes, but I can't really judge his acting very well, since almost all of his lines were dubbed over by a different actor in post. Why they did that, I have no idea. It's possible most of Lopez's audio came back sounding shitty, and he wasn't available to re-record the lines. Audio equipment in the early 80s was not great, to say the least. You have the main female lead and love interest for Conan, Valeria, played by the beautiful and badass Sandahl Bergman. Bergman was a dancer before breaking into acting, and it really shows with her stunts and fight scenes. She's very graceful. She's also easily one of the best legitimate strong female action heroines in any movie, because while she's more than capable in a fight, she shows vulnerability and relatable passion. She feels like a fucking human being. She never whines or goes on any "woe is me, I'm an oppressed woman" type bullshit speeches, way more than can be said for female representation in modern media. She's just a great character, who's actually a synthesis of two female characters from the original stories, Her name and blonde hair is taken from the character Valeria from the story Red Nails, but her personality and the intensely passionate love she has for Conan is pretty heavily based on the pirate queen Belit. She even has a line that's word for word a speech that Belit delivers to Conan in the original Queen of the Black Coast story.
All the gods, they cannot sever us. If I were dead and you still fighting for life, I'd come back from the darkness, back from the pit of hell, to fight at your side.
Rounding out the supporting cast, you have the wizard Akiro, who's both the comic relief character and the main narrator of the film. He's played by the amazing late Japanese actor Mako Iwamatsu, who's more commonly known as Mako. As the narrator of the film, they could not have picked an actor with a better voice. That gravelly, sinister edge to his voice complements the brutal, violent, and harsh world of Hyboria so perfectly.
He did not care anymore. Life and death, the same. Only that the crowd would be there to greet him with howls of lust and fury.
Appropriately, Mako would go on to have a pretty strong career as a voice actor, with his best-known voice role being the dastardly demon Aku in the beloved animated show Samurai Jack.
Can you summon demons, wizard?
Yes! I strike at you. I would summon a demon more ferocious than all in hell!
Which itself owes some of its visual language to this movie. To complete this great cast, you have the villain, the cruel and manipulative cult leader, Thulsa Doom. James Earl Jones wasn't content with having just one iconic fantasy villain under his belt. He had to have two. And for my money, Thulsa Doom I think is a stronger antagonist than Lord Vader. Where Vader is a psychotic brute who murders his own lackeys when they fuck up, but receives a redemption arc, which is a villain archetype that's been copied countless times since, Thulsa Doom I find to be more unique, because he has no redemption arc. He's pure evil, to the point where he compels one of his followers to jump off of a ledge to her death just to make a point. Thulsa Doom is a sorcerer with a god complex, who sees every person under him as a thing to be used and disposed of. He has powers to manipulate and even control people to agree with him, and even goes so far as to betray and murder their own loved ones in their devotion to him. He's a conniving demagogue who lies and twists people's emotions and feelings to see those above them as evil and overthrow the societies they live in to create an illusory world of free expression and love while being oblivious to the fact that they're nothing more than his playthings that only exist to satisfy his wants, who will be ignored and discarded when they no longer prove useful to him. Which is definitely not applicable to some real-life figures I could point at. He is a snake in man's clothing, in more ways than one. He is simply one of the most detestable and evil movie villains ever conceived, evoking the seductive but evil rhetoric of leaders like Hitler, Manson, and Jim Jones, while also existing believably within Howard's universe. Speaking of which, it's worth noting that once again, Thulsa Doom is a combination of two characters from Howard's stories. The name Thulsa Doom is taken from the arch-enemy of Howard's other famous barbarian, Kull of Atlantis. This version of the character is a necromancer with a literal skull for a face who, in case you're wondering, was in fact the direct inspiration for Skeletor from the He-Man franchise. The portrayal of the character in the movie, though, is much closer to the villain Thoth Amon, an evil sorcerer and cult leader from the Egyptian-inspired country of Stygia, who fanatically worships the snake god Set, and is Conan's legit arch-nemesis, having made battle against him in his youth as a bandit, and once again as king of Aquilonia. It is worth mentioning in the movie that they say that Thulsa Doom is rumored to be 1,000 years old or more. Now, Kull existed in the same world as Conan, albeit separated by 8,000 years, so it could be possible that the Thulsa Doom in this movie is the same character that existed in the Kull stories. which may or may not be reinforced by the tomb scene depicting the long-dead Atlantean king that many fans have theorized to be none other than Kull himself, giving Conan the charge to vanquish his ancient enemy once and for all. Though how Thulsa Doom went from a skull-faced necromancer to James Earl Jones in a hokey wig is anyone's guess. I have to stress that this is purely gigantic, nerd-fueled tinfoil hat speculation on my part. By no means does the movie support any of these theories, but it doesn't outright deny them either. Regardless of whether he is connected to his literary counterpart, this Thulsa Doom is still an amazing villain. He's also got some of the best dialogue.
Infidel defilers. They shall all drown in lakes of blood. Now they will know why they are afraid of the dark. Now they will learn why they fear the night.
That line, in the hands of a lesser actor, could have easily come off as cheesy and over the top. But emanating from the lips of Mr. Jones, it's one of the most blood-curdling declarations that any movie villain has ever made. James Earl Jones himself will be missed, and his villain roles like Darth Vader and Thulsa Doom, along with his heroic roles, will live on forever. This movie overall is just filled with top-tier lines and dialogue.
Conan, what is best in life? To crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of your women.
What daring! What outrageousness! What insolence! What arrogance! I salute you.
My child, you have come to me, my son. For who now is your father if it is not me? Who gave you the will to live? I am the wellspring from which you flow.
John Milius's talents as a writer are on full display here. We're talking about the guy who wrote this speech from Dirty Harry.
I know what you're thinking. Did he fire 6 shots or only 5? Well, to tell you the truth, in all this excitement, I've kind of lost track myself. But Ian, this is a .44 Magnum, the most powerful handgun in the world, and would blow your head clean off. You've got to ask yourself one question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
This speech from Jaws.
You know the thing about a shark, he's got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eyes.
And wrote the entire script for Apocalypse Now.
You smell that? Napalm, son! Nothing else in the world smells like that! I love the smell of napalm in the morning. It smells like victory.
And my god, the score. I already made a whole ass 20-minute video talking about why Basil Polidorus' score for this movie is just one of the best movie scores ever. Basil Polidorus himself is just one of the best composers no one ever talks about. He did the music for not only this movie, but Red Dawn, Hunt for Red October, RoboCop, White Fang, Starship Troopers, Free Willy, the 90s version of Les Miserables. The guy was a gem to the world of movie music, and he is also sorely missed. The amount of times I've worked out, gone on long trips, or worked on long projects while blasting this movie's soundtrack cannot easily be counted. The visuals and art direction are amazing too. Since John Milius and his cinematographer Duke Callahan, along with set designer Ron Cobb, tried very hard to match the color palette, visual design, and atmosphere of the work of iconic fantasy painter Frank Frazetta. For those not in the know, Frank Frazetta was the artist responsible for basically establishing the modern-day aesthetic and feel of the Conan universe. His paintings were used as the covers for the paperback book collections of Howard's stories that were printed in the 60s and 70s. And that same style was imitated by the popular Conan comics of the 70s that were put out by Marvel. So the popularity of both these book collections and the Marvel comics inspired by the art of these books were enough to garner the attention and intrigue from Hollywood to even make a movie adaptation of the character possible. So you'd best believe that the filmmakers tried to honor Frazetta's art style as much as possible. Honestly, I can talk about this movie forever, and its themes, its significance, and how it made me a fan of Howard's work, making me seek out not just the original Conan stories, but those of Kull and Solomon Kane. To the point where I even visited Howard's grave in person and paid my respects by reading one of his Solomon Kane poems out loud. The legacy this movie left behind on other big-name creators is also immense. The creator of the super popular manga Berserk, Kentaro Miura, cited this movie as one of the big influences on the manga. The movie's gritty adult tone and atmosphere was also likely a big inspiration on George R.R. Martin's famous Song of Ice and Fire book series, and the even more famous TV adaptation Game of Thrones. Also, filmmaker Robert Eggers, who directed movies like The Witch, The Lighthouse, and the new Nosferatu remake, is a huge fan of this movie. His Norse adventure epic The Northman is massively inspired by Conan, down to the scene where the main character Amleth enters a tomb to retrieve a sword from a skeletal warrior, just like the incredible tomb scene where Conan retrieves the Atlantean sword. Eggers actually said that the chief effects technician on the tomb scene in The Northman was actually the son of the effects guy who toppled the skeletal king's head over in the scene from Conan. Crazy, right? By the way, the Arrow video release of this movie is the home release to own. It has every feature from the past releases, including some new ones. One of my favorite new features is that they interview actor Jorge Sanz, who played the child version of Conan in the film's beginning, and lots of other good stuff. It also has every different cut of the movie, including the extended cut that has a really good scene of character building between Conan and Subotai. If you want to own this movie, get this version. This is a top 5 all-time movie for me. It gets better and better on each subsequent viewing. Between the music, the awesome characters and dialogue, the action sequences, and the authenticity with which Howard's literary world is brought to life, it's easy to see why this is my all-time favorite adventure film. In both Hyboria and on this list, Conan is king. I hope that with this video, I not only introduced you to some films that you might never have heard of, but also helped you see the more well-known ones in a different light, along with providing you a decent escape from all the bullshit of the real world for a spell. Because like I said before, this is one of the genres that really epitomizes the concept of escapism. Most people think escaping into fiction is just being evasive and ignorant of the real world, but that's not what it's about at all. Storytelling is not merely meant as a means of temporarily forgetting the real world, but doing so with the purpose of reorienting the audience's spirits and giving them new inspiration and motivation to endure and prosper in the real world. Because no matter how many dragons, hydras, skeletons, and dinosaurs terrorize the heroes in these film classics, the internal stories that these characters go through and strive through are an authentic and vicarious example for real audiences to draw from. Life itself is an adventure. And though we may not be fist-fighting Nazis, running from a Cyclops, facing down an ancient Chinese sorcerer, or trying to rescue a stolen train from a war zone, every person who tries to realize an ambition faces more than a few struggles and challenges. And sometimes they fail at those ambitions. But to reuse a pretty worn-out cliche, trying to do something is often more valuable than succeeding at it. Because in that attempt you learn new things, and that knowledge you attain can help you set new goals that are more achievable. Like Curtin and Howard in Treasure of the Sierra Madre, at the risk of spoiling too much, they don't get what they set out to get. But in the process, they discover something better, and they make the most of their new circumstances. Heroes like Indiana Jones, Sinbad, Jason, Conan, Frodo, or Robin Hood, they all adapt and change through their stories because of their experiences. Every movie on this list is just as much about the adventures within the lead characters as the ones that happen without. They go through arcs and crucibles, just like stories in real life do. I'm reminded of the speech that Aunt May gives to Peter in Spider-Man 2.
Lord knows, kids like Henry need a hero. Courageous, self-sacrificing people, setting examples for all of us. Everybody loves a hero. People line up for them, cheer them, scream their names, and years later they'll tell how they stood in the rain for hours just to get a glimpse of the one who taught him to hold on a second longer. I believe there's a hero in all of us that keeps us honest, gives us strength, makes us noble, and finally allows us to die with pride.
Not to be overly sappy and sentimental, but there's immense truth in what May says here. Stories of heroism, change, reflection, endurance, stoicism, and courage are the things that are all endemic to adventure tales. These are the traits that emblemize the struggles of the human experience. When people are inspired by any one thing, be it a story, a person, or some type of action, it's the most powerful and significant thing in their life. That's the proverbial person that May says teaches us to hold on just a second longer. The thing that would compel us to withstand the elements just to say thank you. We want characters, people, or just anything in general to cultivate hope and ambition to keep us going in spite of every factor working against us. But today we have a deficit of those things, those people, those stories, those events. So much nihilism and postmodern mockeries of culture exist now, but it doesn't have to be that way. We can do better. We can make better stories. We can be the ones to guide people's purposes and allow them to die with pride. I'm hoping with this video and with the book I'm currently writing, I'll guide people to the path of doing precisely that. This video was quite a lot of work. I hope everyone found it worth the wait. Thank you all so much for your patience and the time you dedicated to reaching the end. You can expect more content from me in the future. Be well, and always hold on to your passions. And now for something a little different. We're going to have a little show and tell. For those who may not know, I requested my viewers to submit pieces of art that I could use for thumbnails for both parts of this video, with the theme being something epic and captivating, and I got quite a few entries that I think fit that mood quite well. First entry is a pretty little Photoshop piece from my friend and fellow video maker Tributes to Fiction. The two big attention getters here being the squid from 20,000 Leagues in the foreground, and the silhouette of Conan all wreathed in a nice glowing gold light to give the impression of a rising sun. Very nice. Then we get to the actual thumbnail that I used for part 1. This piece was done by the channel Godsgirlcreations, and it is beautiful. Really nails the aesthetic and pastel color palette of 30s and 40s movie posters to a T. I don't know how she achieved that oil painting mosaic look, but it's a very interesting detail and makes the picture look more real and tactile. Great stuff. This next piece is from Tovarish Tatarin _Z. It's a really good Photoshop composition. I told him that the Talos was the main centerpiece that loomed over everything else. That'll be a recurring theme in the next couple of images. I also really like seeing Mifune and Conan on the same side. Very, very nice. This next piece is from Minima Opacity. This has all the same characters from the last image, but in a really cool animated art style. A lot of the ideas I have to credit to him. He came up with the idea of having the film strip in the background and having the Talos stretching its hand out to grab one of the characters. Also, not sure if you can see, but the images on the film strip are actually shots from the various movies throughout the list. There's just a lot of cool stuff going on here. You can see Jack Burton and Lopan in an epic struggle along with Conan and Thulsa Doom facing each other down. Also, the light green oxidation marks on the Talos are a really nice touch. I love the comic book style. It gives a nice bit of variety. Hopefully this guy goes into comic book art or something. And now for the coup de grace. This masterpiece comes from Mr. Luis Diaz and his company Black Blood Artistry. For this piece, I wanted a work of art that evoked the stunning watercolor canvases of legendary poster artist Drew Struzan, whose name I believe to be synonymous with the realm of cinematic adventure. And boy, did this piece deliver. Everything about this, from the way Bronson and Mifune are rendered, to the unmistakable presence of the Talos in that same iconic pose, looming over everything else. All of these characters are replicated perfectly from the movie frames or publicity photos that inspired them. And as I'm sure you all noticed, this is the image I decided to use for the thumbnail of part 2, and it's easy to see why. I recommend checking out Mr. Diaz's Instagram page for more gorgeous art if you're interested. If you're someone who submitted a picture and yours was not featured in a thumbnail, know that I have nothing against you, and I do appreciate your efforts hugely. I figured showing your work off in this section was the least I could do. Hey, I just wanted to provide a quick interruption here to deliver some very unfortunate news. On the day that I'm recording this, I recently learned that Drew Struzan very sadly passed away yesterday due to, I believe it was complications from Alzheimer's, which is not a great way to go. He wasn't a young man. He was like 78 years old, but you know, I sympathize with his family and all of his friends and acquaintances. It's sad that such a talented man had to go in a way like that. And I just wanted to take the time to sort of acknowledge that and maybe pay a bit more tribute, because this man's brushstrokes probably single-handedly defined nostalgia for a whole generation. So, yeah, I just wanted to briefly say rest in peace, Drew Struzan, and my condolences go out to all of his family and friends. That's all I wanted to say on the matter. Well, it's been a hell of a journey, folks. We've been to the Amazon, Mexico, the ocean, Egypt, the Middle East, the Caribbean, Middle Earth, outer space, feudal Japan, medieval England, Fantasia, the Old West, San Francisco's Chinatown, ancient Greece, the Civil War, Cagliostro, and the Hyborian Age. But all epic sagas must end. Thank you all so much for your patience in the whole year and 3 months that it's taken me to write, edit, and publish this video. I'm going to be taking it easy on the projects for a good bit. I hope that I brightened your day up and maybe even your life with some quality cinema. Until next time, my wonderful audience, take care, and once again, may your adventures be safe.